My review of the new Matrix movie last week upset some of you. So just to clarify, I criticised the new Matrix movie because it's a terrible movie. I don't care how good its director's intentions may have been, nor how brave and beautiful the subtext. The movie sucked, simple as. But now's your chance to attack me, because my fourth Odgrub video was, in many ways, eerily similar to the fourth Matrix movie. Because it's weird, it's meta, it's a sort of sequel but also not a sequel to a series that many considered over, and it's alienated fans of the series for not being what they expected. Also, I can't help but notice its story about Odgrub coming to terms with how he mistreated the woman in his head is a better trans empowerment story than the fourth Matrix movie was. It certainly makes more sense. Enjoy. I have different tiers of content. At the bottom are the vloggy clicks Phillip videos that I sometimes make, where I'll reuse existing footage and I'll only watch through it once properly before releasing it. And at the very top of this tier list is Odgrub. These days a new Odgrub video starts out with months of planning. Then when I do finally get around to loading up Skyrim, the process is measured in weeks instead of hours.
Good morning.
I would say that I don't put a deadline on these videos. I let them take as long as is needed to get it right. But with the new video, that is now a lie. For you to understand this video, you first need to know how important Odgrub is to me. I'm mostly talking about the Ebony Warrior episode in this part of the video, because that is still the biggest and best video that I've ever made, but it applies to all of the Odgrub videos to some extent. For you, the Odgrub videos might be something that you have or haven't seen. You might really like it, enough perhaps to have rewatched them several times. But for me, it's the crowning achievement of my life so far. I have watched them hundreds of times. Forget about money, forget about my 1 million subscribers on YouTube, forget about that 7-ball 6-up 360 that I pulled off that one time. The Ebony Warrior video is, to me, like a massive mountain sticking out of my life's timeline. Before its release, it took a ridiculous amount of time and effort to make, and even now, 2.5 years after its release, it's still paying off, making my day-to-day life just that little bit better simply for existing there, with it still being watched by people. I'm not on the same high as I was weeks or months after its release, but it is still a positive contribution to my daily happiness. And I really mean that. The next few minutes will sound utterly insane, unless you've had some pet project that you've spent a large chunk of your life obsessing over. The sort where you think, why, wouldn't it be sad if I died before I could share this with the world? You know, like those childhood obsessions where you'd imagine a movie you'd like to make or a game you'd love to make one day. You're fixated by this for weeks or months, and then one day you sort of move on and never return to it, because you don't have either the resources, the skills, or the patience to pull it off. Well, the Odgrub series is that sort of obsession for me, only I do have the resources, skills, and the patience to pull them off. Planning a new Odgrub video is something I can excitedly think about when I'm lying in bed at night, busily constructing a deep storyline and combining it with my knowledge of Skyrim's world and mechanics. I don't need to write any of this down, it's burned into my mind from hundreds of sessions like this, and it remains like that until the video's done, at which point that finished video then replaces all those prior memories. And despite there being nothing standing between me and finishing a video like this, apart from a hell of a lot of work, completing an Odgrub video remains in my mind as an impossible pipe dream right up until the moment the video is published. So for all you people out there who haven't yet finished a dream project, let me share with you what it's going to be like once you finish one. Surely there's no way it could be as good as you were expecting it to be in your mind. Well, you know what? That Ebony Warrior video is better than I expected it to be. It isn't the same video as I had planned for in my head, but I'm equally happy with what it became. Some of the moments in that story I thought would be the most impactful or important weren't, while there were others which I didn't give much thought to before making them, which ended up being my favourites. It took me half a year of my life to make that video, yet I hardly remember anything about that process. What I do remember are random moments from day-to-day life after that video was released, where simply thinking about the project was enough to turn those moments into special nostalgic memories. That Ebony Warrior video is still a source of new, fond memories for me. It sounds ridiculous, but I can't imagine my life without that video existing anymore. I really think it's a big part of life itself to have dream projects that you can chip away at and to eventually complete. And it's so great for it to finally be out there, meaning I can break free of my silence and to actually talk about it and to discuss it with other people. It's truly wonderful. But what then? What do you do once your dream project is done? Obviously life carries on, but at some point you will want to work on another dream project, and when you do, your previous dream project becomes your nightmare. It overshadows everything that you try to do, and it's impossible not to compare whatever you're currently working on with it. Or I guess it could be like that. It hasn't been the massive problem for me that I thought it could have been. The Ebony Warrior video isn't going anywhere, so anything I do now is extra. So I try to make it so that it doesn't matter how my new projects are compared to it. But I wanted to make the next Odgrub video I released different enough that comparisons between it and previous ones were difficult. I had several Odgrub videos planned, but I chose to do this one first because firstly it was the smallest, and secondly because it was the most different of the lot. It felt like the best option to break free of the Ebony Warrior video's looming shadow over me, and to get me back into working with Skyrim again. My dad gave me the idea for it. I was on a walk telling him all about the story of the Ebony Warrior video and the tragic death of Lydia, and rather conveniently, I got this reply on film.
Maybe he killed her in a dream.
It's a cop-out, Dad. And it wasn't just him. I saw many people saddened by how Lydia was dead. Surely it had to be a trick of some kind. How could the Odgrub series carry on without her? To a lot of people, Lydia was such a fundamental part of Odgrub's character, despite her only being on screen for the first 15 minutes. Perhaps because it was such a massive cop-out, I like the idea of bringing her back, almost despite everybody who wanted it. All like, here you go, you've got what you wanted. Oh, what's that? It feels anticlimactic, doesn't it? Yeah, it does. But as usual, the more I thought about a bad idea, the more I realised it was a good one. April Fool's was coming up, the perfect excuse for a parody. It was all a dream episode, as though written by somebody too scared to kill Lydia off or to do all the questionable things I love Odgrub for. I turned the idea of the dream on its head by setting the whole video in a dream, making it easy for fans of the series to dismiss it if they didn't like it. And since it's set in Odgrub's mind, it let me get away with a load of silly cringe stuff that doesn't normally have a place in the Odgrub series. But it was also an excellent what-if opportunity, a chance to tell of an alternate timeline where Odgrub didn't kill Lydia. Watch the Ebony Warrior video up to the 15 minutes 19 second mark, then switch over to this one and it will tell the story as though the original end of the Ebony Warrior video had been just a bad dream. What if he hadn't killed Lydia? What if they had fought the Ebony Warrior together? And what if Odgrub finally opened up to Lydia about everything? So it really let me toy with those ideas without ruining the reality of the situation in the slightest. The first script for A Glimmer of Hope was very silly. I set up to make the stupidest, silliest story possible. Lydia and Odgrub spoke in silly voices throughout, and they talked a lot. They behave stupidly and have a childish sense of humour, because it is all just a dream, it doesn't matter. Plus it's April Fool's. I did always plan to have Odgrub die at the end of it though, because I think at this point I'm incapable of making a truly happy video. So yeah, A Glimmer of Hope was scheduled to premiere on April the 1st, but I took it down again because I thought that it could be better. It was silly and funny, but with a bit of effort I knew that it could be more than that. By this point I had invested so much time thinking about the story that I didn't want to waste it all on what was, at the time, just an April Fool's joke. I needed a video that worked for the other 364 days of the year as well. So I set to work making the ending of this video sad. It's amazing how close comedy is to tragedy. They're sort of opposites, but then they complement each other really well as well, if done in the right way. The best comedies are silly tragedies, and the best tragedies are twisted comedies. And I realised that having a silly video would lure people into a false sense of security, making a sad ending feel more impactful as a result. But when I watched the video back, it didn't feel like that. The silly bit would make people resent it, and then once resentful, the impactful finale would not have landed, because viewers would already have set themselves up for hating it. So I then worked backwards through the video, swapping out the silly themes for something a bit more serious. And that was difficult, because then I wanted the best of both worlds. I wanted it to be serious while also keeping all of the dank jokes I had thought up for the silly version, but I couldn't do this because it would have been a mess. You can still spot traces of the original humour, but it's used sparingly, because yes, it is funny to do a silly quip after a serious sequence, but do that too much and it risks becoming a Marvel movie. And Odgrub whispered, "For Frodo." Speaking of Lord of the Rings, I can now really understand the difficulties that Peter Jackson had with them. The theatrical versions are amazing, but the extended scenes are all sillier in theme, and in my opinion, inferior. I don't like them. I don't like seeing hobbits growing in the woods, I don't like Gimli getting drunk, and while I think it's hilarious the way that Gwendroth breaks into song at the funeral, I don't think it was intended to be funny in that way. What was Peter Jackson thinking when he made those scenes? But having had to do the same thing with Odgrub, where I turned something silly into something serious, I now understand how hard it is to remove bits that I enjoyed coming up with in the first place. Maybe, at an earlier date, the theme of Lord of the Rings movies was more funny and light-hearted, and it was only after filming it that they discovered how great the serious bits were, and therefore the style of the movies changed, with the funny bits no longer fitting the rest of the theme so well. And it saddens me that the extended editions appear to have become accepted as being the definitive editions of those movies, as if the theatrical versions are deemed inferior because they only existed because the movies needed to be shorter for cinema viewings. I have this weird theory that the Hobbit movies are what Lord of the Rings would have been like had they kept the silly scenes instead of the serious ones, and I wonder if an extended edition of the Hobbit movies might even improve on them if they feature serious or grittier scenes that Peter Jackson didn't deem suitable for the stupider, bouncier, plinkier, plonkier, more childish and embarrassing theme and style that the Hobbit movies strive to achieve. So I do have appreciation for how difficult it can be to decide on a theme, without the luxury of hindsight. And when cutting out all the stupid stuff from my own Odgrub video, I ultimately chose to keep some of it in.
I believe you'll be wanting some of your burdens back!
Like Lydia's silly voice, because that silly voice segment of the Ebony Warrior video was so well received. For a lot of people, that was the best bit about it. Forget about the plot twists and epic fights. Stupid sounding voices can sometimes get a better reaction. And looking at the feedback this latest Odgrub video has received, yes, it appears that silly voices are still really funny. I'm still split over what Odgrub's first words should have been. I should have chosen something better for him to break his silence with than "for Frodo." But I couldn't think of anything funnier, so it remained. And it's only after the video's release that I knew for sure if that was the right decision. And with hindsight, I can now say that people really enjoyed that bit, so it was the right call. But you never know until it's released. Each Odgrub video can be summarised with a single word. With the Ebony Warriors video, it was redemption, and this one is sentimental. This video is meant to be like an epilogue before moving on to the next storyline. Sort of like a tribute to Skyrim's followers and the bond you form with them.
You lead, I'll follow.
And the dream setting let me delve more deeply into Odgrub's character without diluting it in the awake sequences of the other videos. When I'm planning an Odgrub video, I'm not really picturing a full video. I picture a feeling, which I try to represent over several key sequences. A lot of the video goes unplanned until I'm literally right there making them. For me, though, one of the key sequences I did plan for was Odgrub pouring his heart out at the end, and Lydia forgiving him. I see that some people are saying that this video doesn't bring any character development to the table, but I disagree with that. I think those last few minutes really say a lot about Odgrub. As a viewer, you only get to see the final version. You don't see how it's changed and evolved since the beginning, and so you don't get that feeling that I had when I first started on this project. You just see the end thing and the feeling that comes along with that, and then you judge every part of the video on that feeling. But for me, the feeling of this video has changed so many times during development that it's a lot harder for me to know what has worked and what hasn't. So yeah, in short, A Glimmer of Hope was developed in a completely different way from the rest of the Odgrub videos, and I wanted to keep some of those differences in the final thing because otherwise what's the point? It is good to experiment, and who knows, some people might think it's the best video yet. It isn't the best one for me, but it does its purpose and it lands those crucial final scenes, and that's all I can ask for. It's earned its place in the Odgrub series. I want to make it clear that A Glimmer of Hope shows Odgrub's point of view. It is his dream, and in it we can see the inner workings of Odgrub's mind. We don't know what Lydia thinks about things because she's dead. I don't want anybody watching these videos to think I'm misogynistic or in the belief that Lydia should forgive him for what's clearly chronic abusive behaviour. I deliberately leave Lydia's thoughts on the matter following her death a secret, because I don't think I'm capable of showing them in an Odgrub video, and trying to would just remove the mystery of their relationship. A Glimmer of Hope is Odgrub's way of coming to terms with Lydia's death, and in convincing himself that she would have forgiven him for the things he's done, with the possible exception of her death. That remains unanswered, and that's definitely the best bit of the video for me, and was only possible because the characters spoke in this episode. If you must know, I totally reworked that sequence about 5 hours before the premiere. It previously had a lot more talking in it, and Lydia's responses were much longer. It was only last minute that I swapped Odgrub's voice for my narrating voice, and Lydia's response to a simple, "I was sworn to carry your burdens." I'm a big believer in letting characters' actions do the talking. For this video, I had to have them talk a bit, at least. But more was less, and the fewer words I got them to say, the more powerful it was. And it's why I swapped out Lydia's silly voice for a narrator's voice for those last few scenes. Voices help to tell the story, but silence leaves more to the imagination. And wow, my normal content is rushed. No gaps between sentences, me going from one thing to the next. It's why I'm so frustrated when a video of mine goes over the 8-minute mark and then people inadvertently accuse me of doing that deliberately to get more ad revenue, because that couldn't be further from the truth. I'm forever condensing and summarising and making my content as short as possibly possible. So I've enjoyed the slower pace of these Odgrub videos, slow fades in and out, totally black screens, and scenery shots accompanied by dramatic orchestral music. It's a refreshing change to my normal content, and I just wanted to tell you that. Music is such an important part of an Odgrub video for me. I've always loved the music in Elder Scrolls games. I don't know if it's because I've spent so long listening to them or just because they're genuinely nice sounding tracks, but the Odgrub series is a wonderful chance to accompany emotional moments with the tracks which mean the most to me. Problem is, it's too easy to get stuck in the habit of using the same few songs excessively. I picture a scene in my mind and immediately imagine it being accompanied by a track like Day 9 or Boss 2, And once I've done that, it's difficult to use anything else without it feeling like a missed opportunity. Which is stupid, because I often think these scenes are best accompanied by a track that I haven't used so much before. The Boss 3 fight in the Ebony Warrior video was amazing, and I used Combat 1 for the finale this time around, and I think it fits the scene perfectly. But one song I had to use at a particular point was the Day 3 music. The first half of it is nothing special, but the second half has got to be the saddest song that Skyrim has, and I couldn't imagine Odgrub's death scene being accompanied by anything else. I've imagined that bit of the video so many times, and I tell no lie, editing that sequence brought a tear to my eye as it gradually became the sequence I hoped it would be. Even listening to it now makes me emotional, having sunk so much time planning that scene, and future ones. And if you don't feel the same way about that scene and music choice as I do, then I can only hope the death scene will grow on you as it has for me. It's about more than just what's in that video. It reveals so much that has been unanswered for so long. For me, it's definitely the high point of that video, if not the series, so far. I set the Odgrub series to premiere, and as usual, it was immediately greeted with downvotes and comments accusing me of delaying it. Back in April, I got more than just that. I got death threats and some people threatening suicide. And it doesn't matter if these things are jokes or empty threats, it still sucks to receive stuff like this, and it feels personal when it's on content that I've produced, resulting from decisions that I've made. Now, I accept that I won't get any support for this kind of thing. I'll just be told to ignore it and that it's clearly intended as a joke, which it might be. It might also not be. And I have encountered some thoroughly nasty people and situations in these past few years, which makes me suspect that not all of this can be intended as a joke. I don't think you can know how you'll react to receiving stuff like this until you receive it. And I've discovered that I'm not the sort of YouTuber to have a mental breakdown. Instead, I get angry. How dare people joke or make threats about this kind of stuff? I tell no lie, this sort of stuff really gets to me. Almost as much as when people tell me to laugh it off and to ignore it. No, I won't. Life doesn't work like that. And also, the ironic thing is, people accuse premieres of delaying content that they feel they should have rightful access to right now. But for me, scheduling a release date makes it release sooner because it puts me under immense pressure to try and get it done in time. And I need that pressure. Without it, an Odgrub video's development will balloon. I'll reach an important bit of the story and will decide that I can't do it justice, so I'll put that project on hold until I can. But with the release date set to the 11th of the 11th, I suddenly had to dedicate every waking moment of every day working on that video. Stuff I'd normally have put on hold, I just had to get on with and to make do with what I had. I even managed to send a preview version to friends 24 hours before release. All that was missing was the final fight, which I spent a large chunk of November the 11th editing. Had I more time, I would have redone some scenes. The bit with the diary was done back in March, and since then I've reformatted and lost that save. I didn't have time to re-record that bit, but I would have at least changed the time of day from evening to morning to make more sense in the grand scale of things. In fact, that whole segment of video with him walking back to town feels a bit weird, but that might not be a bad thing. I felt the same with the Parthenax scene in the Ebony Warrior, but showing the dragon locking himself away on the mountain because he was unable to control his behaviour perfectly set the scene for Odgrub locking his darker side up there at the end of the video. So maybe it's nice to have a slightly vague bit like that. I didn't originally plan for the Ebony Warrior to reveal that he was Odgrub. It was initially meant to be left as a diary entry for people who were looking for it. But if none of the 1.6 million viewers of the Ebony Warrior episode ever got that, then I feel I might as well make it more obvious and capitalise on that plot twist at least a bit. Here's the kicker. All in all, A Glimmer of Hope took me just a week to make. It was a tough week, but just a week. 52 Odgrub videos a year, anyone? A Glimmer of Hope wasn't just an important thing to get released to get the Odgrub series back on track, but also for me to prove to myself that it didn't have to take months and months to make a new Odgrub video. With such a strict deadline, compromises had to be made. I always long for an extra day of previewing and polishing. I managed to get this video done in 4 preview renders, compared with the Ebony Warrior's like 50 or so. I have a few niggling issues with The Glimmer of Hope that I didn't have time to perfect, like when a music track kicks in, or maybe there's some small error or inconsistency with the story here or there. It's funny, 1.6 million people may watch an Odgrub video and not pick up on key plot points, but you bet they'll find any superficial bug or issue. It's disheartening to spend months on a video, only to see somebody's response being all like, "You said a place name wrong." Sadly, as you know by now, I missed the premiere's deadline. I had done every preview before that in 1080p and thought I had time to get the final version of the video done. But 4K renders take their toll, and by the time that had rendered, uploaded and processed, it was past midnight, and I had already delayed the premiere by a few hours. It wasn't fair on everyone that I kept waiting. That's real man hours being wasted there, and I ultimately decided that it was best to bite the bullet, to miss the 10-year anniversary and to release it 24 hours later instead when everybody could view it. In this time I didn't change the video at all, but did hand type the subtitles, which themselves are packed with jokes and references. So on November the 12th, 10 years and 1 day after Skyrim's initial release, A Glimmer of Hope was released to an audience of 400 people, which was 10 times fewer than The Ebony Warrior had. And after the first 24 hours, it still had 10 times fewer views than the previous Odgrub video had done. And responses were mixed. Before the video's premiere, I would have been horrified at this. I would have called it a failure. Yet I don't think it has been. It has felt great to get this video out, and to see a new Odgrub video finally available in the playlist. I know that it will be watched for years to come, and in a way, I'm kind of pleased it's had a mixed response. It has lowered the expectations for an Odgrub video, while also serving a purpose that I believe greatly adds to the series and past episodes. What is a like on YouTube? What is a dislike? Well, not much anymore, but hear me out, because from the reaction Glimmer of Hope received, YouTube would deem it to be worse than most of my other videos, when that clearly isn't the case. It might not be my best video ever, but it's still up there as being one of the biggest and best projects on this channel, and certainly more deserving of a like than that stupid smile face meme that you liked without a moment's notice. The only reason this video is disappointing people is because it isn't literally the best video I've ever made. So really, a like isn't a like, it's a gauge of whether or not a video has met expectations, and it's clear this fourth Odgrub video hasn't managed that. Kind of like the new Matrix movie. But at least I didn't blow $200 million on making the video. And with this making of, I hope to make my intentions known. Before release, I don't think that I sufficiently communicated what this video was meant to be. I think to many, A Glimmer of Hope was trying to be a full-on sequel to The Ebony Warrior, and was judged by that standard. When that was never my intention, it was always meant to be an extra, bonus bit of content that got the Odgrub formula and tried something new with it. I saw it as me making something from nothing, and thus saw it as a positive contribution to the Odgrub series. Don't worry, there is a proper full-blown sequel to The Ebony Warrior planned, but I want to have some fun with the series before I unleash that one, because believe me, anything I release after that sequel will disappoint you even more. Having poured my heart and soul into this project, I thought I'd get all defensive and argumentative with people posting critical comments. But I've loved those comments more than the rest, because it feels like they've actually watched the video. They're not just commenting on a silly or funny moment, they're delving deeply into the Odgrub story and sharing their genuine feelings about it and why they feel this episode could have been better. I've enjoyed responding to these people to discuss it with them, and I guess I still believe these will be the people who will appreciate the video the most if they ever rewatch it enough times, because it does fill in some gaps, and I believe complements the Ebony Warrior episode well. There's definitely a lot of replayability here. The first time you watch it, it's a cruel joke played on you, but the second time you watch it, the joke is on Odgrub. Even if it doesn't become your favourite episode, I hope you find a purpose for it, and even if you still don't like it, it's just a prank, bro. And it's exactly what I needed after the Ebony Warrior episode, because that set the bar impossibly high and paved the way to a predictable conventional sequel, which would no doubt need to be somehow bigger and better than the ones before it. I wasn't ready to work on a project like that again. So A Glimmer of Hope has set me free. It's a smaller, more playful project that I've enjoyed working on. It's new Odgrub content, but in a weird and very unique way that I hope paves the way for more weird Odgrub experiments. Chronologically, Odgrub's story is nearing the end, but there could be more to his adventures than I first thought. I've got to be very careful about how I tell it, but I can assure you that I care about the series deeply, and I can't wait to work on more.